projects. Let's not go backwards, and let's keep the projects we have and continue moving our community forward.
Garcia? Yes. Gonzalez?
Yes.
Hernandez?
Yes.
First.
Yes, and note that this is a unanimous approval of a prior position. So we're being consistent. Thank you very much. This brings us to item number B, the City Council's position on the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission's Uniform Corridor Study. And this will have a staff report and report by the Regional Transportation Commission, and then time for council questions, and then time for public input, and then time for a long council discussion. And I need a break. It's all yours, Jimmy.
We're adjourned.
That's it. Let's go.
Okay, go ahead. Do your presentation. Who's ever doing it? You're doing it? Okay. Who's starting first? You guys are? Okay, good evening. I think your mic's on.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Ginger Dykar. I'm a Transportation Planner at the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission and Project Manager for the Unified Corridor Investment Study. My coworker, Grace Blakesley, and I will be presenting the draft results of the study for you tonight. And thank you for providing the opportunity for us to present this study to your council. We did provide a handout. I'm hoping all of you have one of these. Members of the public, there's some in the back as well. This will help you. It will be very handy as we go through our presentation of our draft results. The objective of the Unified Corridor Investment Study is to identify multimodal transportation investments that provide the most effective use of Highway 1, SoCal Avenue, SoCal Drive, and Freedom Boulevard, and the Santa Cruz Branch Rail Line to serve the community's transportation needs. I don't think I have to mention the amount of congestion that's out there on Highway 1, SoCal Freedom. In 2012, there was the purchase of the rail line that has unused capacity at present. So how best can we use this rail right-of-way in combination with the transportation improvements on Highway 1 and SoCal and Freedom to address the needs of our community? The project study area is shown here on the slide. We have the rail right-of-way from Davenport to Pajaro Station, SoCal Avenue, SoCal Drive, and Freedom Boulevard are all part of our project study area, as well as Highway 1, also from Davenport and ending at the Monterey County line. The transportation improvements in the Unified Corridor Study are being evaluated using a performance-based planning and scenario analysis approach. We started first to identify the goals of the project. We decided on performance measures in order to define how we would be as a way to measure how we would be advancing those goals. We then evaluated the projects that would be looked at on the various different routes in the Unified Corridor Study area. Once these projects were identified, we put the projects together into various different scenarios. Scenario analysis is an approach that a lot of people use for helping decision makers make decisions on priority projects. It's a way to combine various different projects in different groupings to then determine how well those groups of projects advance your performance measures. Then we went into a two-step scenario analysis. We started out with 6 scenarios as well as a no-build scenario. In the step 1, it was more of a qualitative feasibility for those scenarios. And then those scenarios documentation was approved by our commission last December. We were reduced down for the qualitative analysis in the step 2 to 4 scenarios. And that's where we have the draft results to present to you this evening. Every step of this process, we've had community input. We've received input from the RTC, as well as our partner agencies, stakeholders, advisory committees, etc. And there has been approval of each stage by the commission on each step of the project. So as I mentioned, there's a handout for you to help you understand the various different projects and the scenarios that are being evaluated. Your handout, it looks a little bit different. I think it's That works well. There's also another version that looks like this with the various different projects. So I'll just run through those. It's good to have those in front of you as we're presenting the draft results. So scenario A has the HOV lanes on the highway and BRT light on SoCal Freedom and trail only on the rail right-of-way. So let me just give a brief reminder. I have a slide here. HOV lanes are the high occupancy vehicle lanes, or otherwise known as a carpool lane. So the idea behind this project is that currently there's two general purpose lanes on the highway from Watsonville, primarily just two general purpose lanes from Watsonville to Santa Cruz. The high occupancy vehicle lanes would add a third lane, which could be utilized by either 2 or 3 people at carpool, and as well as transit. This, in order to build these high occupancy vehicle lanes, there's many steps of the projects all the way along the way. The auxiliary lanes need to be built in order to make room for the HOV lanes. The interchanges all pretty much need to be widened in order to make room for the 3 lanes. That would allow for the HOV lanes to move under the interchanges. So the typical step is the auxiliary lanes, the interchange improvements, and then come back and put the HOV lanes in. Auxiliary lanes, so that in case there's any confusion, auxiliary lanes run from the on-ramp onto the highway and then exit at the off-ramp and would not go under the interchanges. But that is a step that needs to be made in order to increase the capacity of the highway through the high occupancy vehicle lanes.
So is that third lane going to be the HOV lane? Is that what you're saying? So the auxiliary lane, HOV lane?
The auxiliary lane, 2 general purpose lanes, eventually would be in between the interchanges would be an auxiliary lane, 2 general purpose lanes, and an HOV lane. Under the interchanges, it would be 2 general purpose lanes and an HOV lane. So let me just step back again. So, and the assumption for all of the scenarios is that all 3 auxiliary lanes that are funded by Measure D, so those are the auxiliary lanes that would run from SoCal to 41st, Bay Porter to Park, and Park to State Park, are already funded through Measure D funds and hopefully leveraging, getting SB1 funds that would leverage those Measure D funds. And if that would occur, then we would be able to have funding for additional auxiliary lanes, as Deputy Director Mendez already mentioned earlier in his presentation. So again, scenario A is HOV lanes on the highway, which includes the auxiliary lanes, as mentioned. It also includes ramp metering. It's scenario A is the trail only on the rail right-of-way, and then BRT light on SoCal Freedom. BRT is short for bus rapid transit. Scenario B on the highway is not capacity increasing projects, but more operational improvements. So there's bus on shoulders and ramp metering. On SoCal Freedom, there's the BRT light, as well as buffered or protected bike lanes. And on the rail right-of-way, the consideration in scenario B is for passenger rail service and trail. For scenario C, this scenario has bus on shoulders for the highway. It has the additional 3 sets of auxiliary lanes that bring the auxiliary lanes all the way to San Andreas Road, and BRT light on SoCal Freedom. And then on the rail right-of-way would be a bus rapid transit system as well as a trail. Scenario E has HOV lanes on the highway, buffered bike lanes on SoCal and Freedom, and on the rail is passenger rail, freight, and trail on the rail right-of-way. The goals for the study are encompassed in 5 different goals. We're looking at safety, reliability and efficiency, environment and health, economic vitality, and equitable access, all based on a triple bottom line analysis. The first goal I'm presenting here is the safety goal. The metric is the number of collisions. So as you'll see in all the slides, when we're forecasting for the future, we're looking at a 2035 time frame. We provide the baseline data. So in our study area, we have 1,110 collisions on average over the last, between 2011 and 2015, when the last data set was available. That data is available from California Highway Patrol. When you look towards the future in a no build, so the no build represents no transportation improvements, with the exception of the 3 sets of auxiliary lanes that are already funded through Measure D, because those are funding is available for those. So that is looking at no build, is looking at the 2035 population in the future, and the number of collisions based on an increase in traffic volume would increase, and the various scenarios. So these are 2035 forecasts as well. So the scenario that shows the greatest reduction in collisions is scenario B, and this is primarily based on the ramp metering projects. Also, the trail that provides a separation for bicyclists and pedestrians from auto vehicles, and education and enforcement. There's not only is there a number of collisions as a performance metric, but we also are looking at the cost associated with collisions. So in Santa Cruz County, on an annual basis, the costs for collisions is on the order of about $500 million. And so by reducing the number of collisions, we're also reducing the cost associated with that. And that cost is not only for the individual, but also the tangible costs of providing all the services that are needed for people who get into collisions. The next performance or goal that we're looking at is reliability and efficiency. We're looking at the auto speed. We have, in general, we looked at a countywide auto speed, but we've received information from the public that we really needed to dial down a little bit better into what's happening on Highway 1 for the various different scenarios. The best data that's available for that is the information from the Highway 1 Draft Environmental Impact Report. They did a more sophisticated analysis, not only using a travel demand model, but another tool to ascertain the speed on the highway. The area that we're looking at here in this graph is between essentially Highway 117 interchange to San Andreas Road, and what those speeds would be for the various different scenarios. The 2015 baseline shows about a average speed during the peak northbound AM peak period of about 28 miles per hour. Again, this is averaged over the whole distance from San Andreas to Highway 117. So that's the baseline. That is a good data set from cell phone data. We also show the no build shows a decrease in the speeds down to about 12 miles per hour due to increased traffic volumes from population increase. And then the scenarios A and E show if the HOV lanes are built, that would improve the speeds on the highway. We don't have exact data for scenario B and C, as I'm trying to show here with the hatching, but the scenario B plus is based on the information from the Draft Environmental Impact Report of the Transportation System Management Alternative. So that B plus considers the 6 sets of auxiliary lanes on the highway as well as ramp metering. So that is at around a little bit over 20 miles per hour. We'll also show here for reliability and efficiency goal, the transit travel time. For the scenarios that have the HOV lanes, this shows here that the express service from Santa Cruz to Watsonville in the peak period travel time in the evening would be about 33 and a half minutes. On the highway for scenario B and E that has rail service, there's an estimate of about 41 minutes from Santa Cruz to Watsonville on the rail right away for transit. For the environment goal, we're looking at a metric of countywide vehicle miles traveled. So with scenario A and E that has the HOV lanes, the amount of vehicle miles traveled is a little bit more than scenario B and C, which is primarily operational improvements. This is based on that people may choose to drive a longer distance because it's a shorter time. If they can go a longer distance but get on the highway and travel at a faster speed than going more of the arterial roads, then that would increase the vehicle miles traveled slightly. One of our other metrics that is for equity is the transit vehicle miles traveled. So this shows you for the various scenarios what type of transit coverage and frequency you're having throughout the county. Our baseline is these are the amount of miles traveled for each transit vehicle. And for the baseline, it's 3.33 million on an annual basis. And so scenario B is showing there's a doubling of transit, and the other scenarios are not far behind. Another metric for the equity goal is the household transportation costs. This analysis shows that the most significant part of household transportation costs is vehicle ownership. Even if you never even drive your car and put fuel in it, just by owning a vehicle, you have a cost of about $5,625 per year on average. So that's about $15 per day. The typical household in Santa Cruz County has 2 vehicles, which would add up to more than $30 a day. And then the average Santa Cruz County household travels about 21,000 miles per year, which is about $13.50 per day that you're spending on fuel. So it adds up to $44.38 per day. Each of our scenarios did not vary too much between the actual household costs, depending on how the mode share shifted. But what the big message here is that if we can provide other options for how people can get around, then that can reduce, and people can therefore reduce the number of vehicles they need to run their household from 2 to 1, from 1 to 0, from 3 to 2, whatever it is, then that will help reduce household transportation costs. I'd like to hand it over to Grace Blakesley.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. One of the measures for economic...
Grace, can you speak up just a little bit more?
Absolutely. Is that better? One of the measures that we have under our economic vitality goal is looking at the level of public investment required, and your council's already had a lot of discussion on the importance of those decisions tonight. The way that this was evaluated for the purpose of the Unified Corridor Study was to look at the funding potential, which is shown in the darker shades on the bottom of these bar charts, and the lighter color is what new public investment would be needed to implement the scenarios in their entirety. This is calculated by looking at the total cost of the project, the cost of the scenarios, which is shown on the right-hand side of the bar charts, and subtracting the funding potential. This is spelled out for each of the scenarios, a capital, and this is the capital slide, and then by operations and maintenance, and is included in the report as tables 38 and 39. When you're looking at new public investments needed, these would be required from future new state or federal grant programs or locally generated funding sources. The cost estimates used to come up with the total cost by scenario are all shown in 2018 dollars. And a variety of sources were used based on the project to develop those costs. Caltrans 11-page cost estimate template was used for a variety of the projects. For projects where local jurisdictions already had cost estimates, we used those cost estimates. And for the passenger rail cost estimates, we looked at the Santa Cruz Branch Rail Feasibility Study and updated unit costs and made any additional changes that were needed. The funding potential also evaluates the revenues that could be available if rail or bus rapid transit on a fixed guideway is implemented. We talked about this a little bit earlier, as there's particular programs under SB1 and at the federal level that are specific to fixed guideway, bus, or transit, and that's where you'll see the difference between the funding potential in scenario A when compared with the other scenarios. In some cases, I was spoken to a bit earlier with Councilmember Dutra's question about the SB1 funding and other funding sources. In some cases, the potential funding identified for a project in the table could be shifted to other projects in the scenario where we've identified as the projects we think which would be most competitive for different funding types, but we would not expect the total funding for scenario to change. Similar exercise was completed to look at the annual maintenance and operation costs for all new transit services, vehicle operations, and vehicle maintenance. It also looked at the maintenance costs for trail projects, bus rapid transit on the Santa Cruz Branch rail line as applicable by each scenario. The annual cost of facility maintenance on state highways was also looked at, and it was assumed to be continue to be fully funded by Caltrans and local jurisdictions. In addition, when we were evaluating the economic vitality measure based on public input that we had in step one of the Unified Corridor study, we looked at an evaluation on visitor tax revenue, how the scenarios would impact visitor tax revenues as well as other economic benefits. So for both of those analysis, the subconsultant strategic economics conducted an analysis that looked at the area impacted by different transportation improvements, looked at who benefited from the improvement, looked at the creation of a new transportation route, so that would apply to projects that would be constructed on the rail right of way, and also the creation of a new amenity, so identifying some of the projects as actually visitor attractions or amenities themselves, which would include the excursion rail as well as the trail project. For visitor tax revenues, the revenue sources that were evaluated were the transit occupancy tax as well as the visitor related sales tax. It looked at how the scenarios impacted the overall improvements to visitor access to major destinations, lodging, shopping, and amenities, and the potential new future visitor amenities. If you look on the left, there's the baseline number, and then to the far right of the slide is the no build. You can see that the changes in the hotel tax revenues and visitor related sales tax revenues are marginal when you compare the no build and the scenarios that would be implemented. It's expected that the scenarios could enhance overall visitor access, but that many of the visitors would already be coming to Santa Cruz and would choose to extend their stay or to have additional expenditures associated with a particular activity. I just want to elaborate a little on that. Some of the things that were looked at by each scenario for this measure was that highway could incrementally enhance visitor access, but the highway did not provide direct access to many of the regional visitor destinations. The trail and excursion rail, again, are assumed to be new visitor attractions. Passenger rail was assumed to provide benefits to visitors since it connects major visitor destinations, and that overall that the visitor access would improve with the implementation of the scenarios. Another piece of the economic vitality analysis was to look at the relative economic benefits of the categories shown here on the far left. The analysis looked at potential impacts the scenarios had on changes in business locations, development potential, property values, changes in business performance, and local tax revenue. And then the analysis looked at a relative comparison of impacts of the scenarios. So that's what you're seeing here on this slide. For example, related to the business locations decisions, the results of the analysis conducted by Strategic Economic determined that improvements that ease access for businesses would have an expected impact on business location decisions. In any scenario that provided a new means of access could significantly impact business location decisions by providing access to a location that was previously not accessible or was difficult to access due to congestion. Access to freight was also expected to influence business location decisions for uses that rely on freight. Trail projects also impacted business location decisions due to the potential clustering of customer-serving businesses in certain locations. Similarly, for project development potential and property values, research showed that providing new connections and new access are likely to have the greatest impact on development and value. So the new transit service that connected destination would be expected to have relatively larger impacts on development potential and project and property values. changes in business performance. We're also very impacted by bicycle and pedestrian improvements that also maintained auto access, similarly to the complete streets concepts that you were discussing earlier, and as well as intersection improvements that provide access to local businesses. We're very glad to be here tonight presenting to you, and we've reached out in another number of ways to our community to get input on this study, both as part of the Step 1 process. We went through many of these same steps, and here we are as we have released the draft results of the Step 2. We've held stakeholder meetings with our partner agencies, which include staff from the city of Watsonville. We've met with the RTC's advisory committees, which include the Bicycle Committee, as well as the Elderly and Disabled Transportation Advisory Committee and the Interagency Technical Advisory Committee, which the City of Watsonville staff also participates in. We held 2 public workshops, one in the City of Santa Cruz and one in the City of Watsonville, and I know that several of you attended, and thank you very much for attending and providing your input at that meeting. We've held 3 focus group meetings so far to meet with neighborhood advocacy groups and transportation advocacy groups, businesses, and environmental groups, and we'll have one more focus group in Watsonville next Tuesday. We've invited many of the Rotary representatives, as well as members of the education community and the Pajaro Valley Chamber of Commerce. We are here giving this presentation. We gave a presentation this afternoon to the city of Santa Cruz. We presented to the city of Scotts Valley last week, and we will be presenting to the city of Capitola in about a week and a half. We'll also be presenting this Friday to the Metro to obtain input. The RTC meetings, we had a meeting to discuss this topic on October 4th and another on October 18th to answer questions. And staff expects to make a recommendation on a preferred scenario for the November 15th meeting, which will be held here in Watsonville at 6 p.m. Staff will not be requesting action at that meeting, but will be requesting action for approval of a preferred scenario on December 6th. The December 6th timeframe will help provide direction to the RTC staff how to implement the priority projects that the Regional Transportation Commission has. We have a dedicated email for this project, ucs@sccrtc.org. So for everyone here and folks on watching, please send us comments to that email address. We are creating and we've created and are updating a frequently asked questions document to capture, to be able to respond to some of the community questions that we have. We consider that a live document. We continue to update as questions come to us. So please submit your comments if you think of them later or if you're watching on TV.
You gave us those dates. You know, I saw the 2 on there, but then you also said they were going to meet with the Chamber of Commerce, and when is that meeting?
The focus group for City of Watsonville, we have on October 30th from 3 to 5.
Where is that? In the community room?
In the community room.
Ms. Blakeslee, does that conclude your
That
report?
does conclude my report. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, and I know that everybody's tickled pink to be here this evening, particularly since we're getting to this item before 10 o'clock. Let's see if our staff has anything or the city manager has anything to add to this before we go to the city council for questions.
Thank you, Mayor Hurst. Yes, I have a few slides just to frame the discussion for tonight, and then we will continue the discussion with additional questions to the RTC staff as well. So why take a position on this item? Our belief is that Watsonville has the most at stake in this particular issue. We have so many residents that make that commute north on Highway 1 that sit in that traffic both ways every day, and it's a tremendous difficulty for our community. It's something we really need to address. We felt it was important to take the opportunity to inform the RTC of Council's position before that recommendation is released on November 15th. It is, in our opinion, very important for Watsonville to express its own opinion on this matter. There's a lot of opinions out there, and as staff, we are looking for guidance and direction on this very important decision from our council. We did an assessment of the alternatives proposed by the RTC, and our determination was that none of the alternatives meet really all of Watsonville's needs. Scenario A, there is no passenger rail service included now or in the future. There's no freight rail in Watsonville under that scenario. In scenario B, there are limited highway improvements but no freight rail service in Watsonville. In scenario C, there is the BRT on the rail will eliminate passenger rail service in that scenario. And scenario E has very limited transit improvements. So there are pieces missing, in our opinion, of each of these alternatives. So what we are recommending is a version of alternative B as sort of the baseline, because that meets a number of our needs, including expanding Highway 1, improving transit service, passenger rail and trail, bike and pedestrian improvements. And then in addition to those that are already included in Alternative B, we recommended including freight service in Watsonville and auxiliary lanes on Highway 1 for additional Highway 1 improvements. Our recommendation is based on our technical analysis of the document, community input in meetings, including the community meeting that was here last week, which definitely favored Alternative B by quite a lot on the DOTS exercise. Discussions with other agencies and other public works departments, other community members across the county. We thought it was also important to avoid scenarios that limit opportunities over the long term. And some of these other alternatives do take out, in particular, the rail line. And our opinion is that there is additional study that needs to happen before that is removed. And then finally, the regional political landscape. Whatever alternative we decide on, we promote or recommend, has to also be accepted by the larger Santa Cruz community, because ultimately any alternative will need to be voted on to fund the local cost share of it. So one thing we wanted to point out tonight, that this vote tonight is not on the project itself. That will be done by the RTC in December. And even once the RTC decision is made, there are many steps and many years of decisions that will go into whatever is constructed. There's a lot of additional technical and cost analyses that need to be made before we really know the numbers of these various alternatives. What really is it going to cost? What really are the options? Right now, everything is very conceptual. There will be a full environmental analysis, and that will include a lot of public input, a full CEQA process. And then again, all of Santa Cruz County must come together, a majority, to vote on how we're going to pay for any of these alternatives. So whatever we decide locally, we need to also put into context what will be supported regionally to get that funding vote passed. So tonight is our opportunity to have input into this process. What we provided was a technical recommendation, and what we are here tonight for is to receive from council, to discuss with council a policy decision around this. We are not attached to the recommendation we have made, but it was our best attempt at what we think would fit the multiple needs of our community. And we're really very much interested in receiving direction and clarity from the council around these particular issues. In the end, no plan will be perfect. We must all come to recognize that. And so what we hope to learn tonight with council is what matters most to our community here. And we have identified 3 key issues that we would love to get clarity on tonight. One is freight rail in Watsonville. I think that's a very important item for us to come together on and make a decision on. Highway 1 improvements. The proposal we have made includes the auxiliary lanes and the buses on shoulders, but it does not include the HOV lanes, and that's something we would like to hear more from council. How important is that to council? And then finally, passenger rail, to include it, to support it, or not. We as staff need this information. Our representatives on the RTC need this information because a vote is coming soon. And so with that, I will just say again, just to reiterate, this is our really our last super clear opportunity to have input with the RTC before they come out with their recommendation, and we want to have our own voice in this process. So I'm going to put back this slide just to help remind us, focus the conversation on these particular issues in hopes that we can get some clarity on council's position on these 3 items. Thank you.
Well, we thank you too, Mr. Palmisano, and we thank the RTC for their time here, and we thank the public. Let's see if the manager's got anything to say before we go to city council questions.
I think Steve stated it well. I'll hold my comments for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Let's go right down the line here with Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a few questions. How does rail work? It's one track, right? I mean, because a lot of the times when I'm in cities, I see light rails passing back and forth 2 ways. This doesn't seem like that seems more efficient to me. So I'm curious on like if it's one track, is it one trip up, one trip down? Like what's your idea of how this is going to work?
There are many places where you have rail service on only one track, and part of the way that it tends to be done is that you find places where you can add a siding track, so that trains can then pass each other in those areas. A lot of times, maybe where you're going to have a train station, maybe have a siding track there and so on. So they
You're expecting more than one train on there?
Oh yes, I mean yes.
Would those siding tracks?
I mean that's a possibility. The commission has not made a decision on exactly what sort of service would be pursued, but that would be a possibility to have a service that you have trains going in both directions with siding tracks so they can pass each other.
And would the siding tracks go into the trail? I mean, since it seems like a lot of areas are tight, right?
Some areas are tight, but there have been areas, and as part of the process, you might recall there was a study in 2015 that looked at the feasibility of passenger rail service, that look at the potential areas where there's sufficient space where you can have the siding track and also have a trail and so on. So there's some areas that wouldn't be wide enough, some areas that would be wide enough.
So because since we're trying to make our decision here, and in the conversations that you had with the RTC, is the board kind of leaning towards adding those side tracks, or I mean, has that conversation even come up? Is this premature? I don't know.
Like I said, there's a feasibility study done that looked at different potential options, and there hasn't been a decision made on what sort of rail service would be pursued. But if you're going to have any sort of usable transit service, you would have to have some siding tracks somewhere.
Okay, and so you said your speed was 35 miles an hour. I think that was the fastest you said it was going to go.
I think that's the average speed, the 35 miles per hour. It's possible in some areas that they can go faster, depending on what you have available in terms of spacing, track, and so on. What's that?
The drop toss, is that where do you feel like the speed's going to be picked up? I mean, there's not very much space. A lot of it's.
Yes, I mean some areas. Like for example, when you leave Watsonville and you go,
right.
from Watsonville.
I get that part.
There's an area where there isn't much for ways, so you can go faster. So there'll be some, it's possible some other areas too where you can go faster. But I think the average speed is about 35 miles per hour.
35. And what's the what is the average of other comparison that you guys have done?
I don't. It varies on the particular service. But okay.
Yeah. It is similar for the SMART train that you've often heard referenced. The Sonoma Marin Area Rapid Regional Transit District is a little bit faster than 35. I think it's like 38 average miles per hour. And I also just wanted to add that as part of the Santa Cruz Branch Rail Feasibility Study, different scenarios were analyzed to look at rail service. The one that was assumed here, and it's described in the appendix on page 151, we describe all of the projects that were evaluated and provide detail. It was based on scenario G of the Santa Cruz Branch Rail Feasibility Study and then extended to Pajaro Station.
Okay, thank you. And how much will each of these trips cost? Someone who's riding the
For the purpose of the Unified Corridor Study, we assume a similar fare structure as the Sonoma Marin Area Regional Transit District, with an average fare of $5.50, which looks at different zones. So there would be three different zones. The commission could decide if they wanted to adopt a similar type of fare strategy, or if they wanted to move in a different direction. There is a range if you look at the similar types of services and in California, and in particular, for example, the Sprinter in San Diego has a fare that's much closer to their local bus transit.
So how many zones are you expecting up and down the coast from Watsonville to Davenport?
You could estimate that there could be 3.
So it's $5.50 a zone. So that's
I'm sorry, between Santa Cruz and
Watsonville. So there's
and Pajaro. Sorry, Santa Cruz to Pajaro. It's important to include
the 3 at $5.50 a zone. So that's
it's $5.50 would be the average. So the base fare would be $3.50, and then if you added a new zone, it would be $2, or a second zone, or $2 again. So the top.
You're gonna be cheaper than our buses. That is, I don't understand. I mean that's.
Support.
I mean I don't understand that.
Supplement.
It's supplemented, but we have to. We'll get to that in our comment time how it's supplemented. But okay, so $5.50. It's going to be heavily it's going to be subsidized heavily then.
The fare for this type, if you look at a $5.50 fare, you would actually look at a pretty high fare box ratio, recovery ratio, somewhere up towards 70%, which is quite high.
Okay. So do
and if I can clarify, for all of the analysis that we do, we make specific assumptions and we report those assumptions to you. It's up to the commission if they decided to implement a similar service or what the fare would be.
Okay. Is that how they did it with the buses? Did a commission? Did the RTC? Are they the ones who made the fares for buses? I mean.
Santa Cruz Metro establishes policy for this.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying that but Metro's going to run the trains. We've got to know who's going to run this, right? Is Metro not going to run this?
It has not been determined what organization would run the trains. Metro would be a likely candidate, being a transit operator, but a joint powers authority or other authority could be established. It would determine on the direction of the RTC.
Then would that authority create the fare, or would you guys create the fare?
If the authority was to run the bus system, it would make the transit rail system. It would make decisions about how that system was implemented.
Okay. Do you think that this will escalate gentrification down here in Watsonville?
There were several equity measures that we looked at as part of the study, and you probably noticed this study has quite a few more performance measures than other studies, and that's because we received input from the community that there was many things that were important to them. So the 3 measures that we looked at for equity related to the transit vehicle miles traveled, which Ginger presented on one slide. We also have a measure which is in the dashboard that we did not present tonight, which looked at the distribution of funding to transportation disadvantaged communities, which in our analysis, the benefits of the projects included in the Unified Corridor Study would be above the percent of the population that's considered transportation disadvantaged. And then the third equity measure we looked at, Ginger also described, which was the household transportation cost measure. And something that, if you look into the report, I think that's really helpful is we evaluated for household transportation costs representative households. And so you can find out what the daily household transportation cost would be for someone who had no vehicles versus 1 vehicle or 2 vehicles. And I think that's a helpful measure of thinking of different types of households in our community.
And how will, let's say someone lives in Mesa Village off of Green Valley Road. How are they going to get to the train station? Or someone who's like living in an area that's kind of, outside of the city limits, or
Park their cars.
But the whole point is not to be driving and parking your cars, right? I mean, the whole part is to stay out of your cars.
They have to go to the train station.
Yeah, exactly.
We have one question at a time,
yeah,
okay?
so I'm trying to ask that.
We work closely with Metro in developing all of the scenarios that included transit. And if you'll notice, included in the cost estimates are local bus connections to the rail system. So that information was provided to us by Metro on how the current bus system could be modified to, or expanded actually, to connect with rail.
Wow, we can expand that service. Let's... If SB1 stays, How many companies rely on freight in Watsonville? I don't know if that's you guys or them.
Currently, there are 4 rail customers on the line.
4.
Yeah,
And
currently,
then
yes.
4. And then I noticed a lot of stored tanks. Is Watsonville are we just becoming a storage place for?
I don't know if you've noticed also that actually the existing operator, Progressive Rail, has been removing those tanks and taking them out of here. They worked out an arrangement with the owners of the tank cars as well as Union Pacific to be moving several cars out per day until they get rid of all of them. That's not part of their business plan to have stored cars.
Okay, so these are old star car. These tanks are from the
previous operator. Yes.
Previous operator. And when will they be completed?
No, I don't know exactly when. This is the second time you asked me a question that I don't know the answer to. I apologize. I do know the answer to the first one, however. The highway construction is anticipated to begin in spring of 2020, not 2022, as someone mentioned. So,
okay, thank you. That's why I thought it was 2020, but stressed me out. And then this last meeting you guys had here, were there a lot of Watsonville residents there, or who were contributing to the conversation, or was it a lot of out of South County residents?
Well, I was asked to actually ask the question for people to raise their hands of those who live within the city of Watsonville, and I did not count, but it looked like about 60% of the people that were there raised their hands when that question was asked. So, I mean, there were still a lot of people. They just raised their hand. I mean, there's still a lot of people that were not from Watsonville. That is true. I mean, a lot of people were still not from Watsonville, but it looked like, a little more than half raised their hands.
I was there. I would confirm that.
Huh?
I was also there, and I would say that would be my assessment as well.
Well, she just told me that's not true. It was a third.
I thought
she
it was about a third.
I thought it was about half.
Well, why aren't they here tonight then? If this was a big issue to the community, I would think that they would have been here this evening. Okay. Well, that's it for right now. The questions. I'm going to marinate on this. Thank you.
Let's go to Member Bilicic.
These scenarios that came up, where did we get them? Who determined these 4 scenarios?
It was a process of going out to members of the public, bringing information about the projects. There was a staff recommendation that was back in, I believe it was June 2017, to bring the projects together into various different scenarios. Sometimes when people do scenario analysis, it's a typical process for metropolitan transportation plans that people do more extreme types of scenarios. So a transit scenario and active transportation with lots of bicycle and pedestrian projects, highway-focused or auto-focused projects. When the project team for this study was putting the scenarios together, we felt like it was much better to bring projects together that would be already grouped into packages that people could actually envision implementing and having it be part of our transportation network. So that's the way they were designed. They were designed to be multimodal, to make sure transit was considered, at least 2 out of the 3 routes. Also make sure there's lots of opportunity for bicycle and pedestrian projects. So I did go through a process for developing them, getting approval from our commission. Really, they got approved twice because they were first approved prior to the Step 1 analysis in June of 2015, and then again at the end of December, there was a slight rejiggering of how the projects would be evaluated in this Step 2 analysis.
The City of Watsonville staff, did they have input?
Was City of Watsonville staff represented at the commission meetings?
Well, did they have input into these scenarios?
We provided it to the RTC advisory committees prior to both of those RTC meetings when we had approval. So there was definitely opportunity. I can't say that City of Watsonville was there, but I think Murray pretty much goes to every meeting of the ITAC. So definitely through that advisory committee.
Like I ask because when I looked at the scenarios and obviously their recommendation too, it didn't look like they met the needs of Watsonville per se. You know, it looks like there needs to be more expansion. In 2016, when Measure D was passed, I think people here are waiting for the expansion of Highway 1. And now we've been told, well, you know, it's 2018. They're going to start any time. Now we're hearing 2020. That's 4 years since it was passed. And one of the things that I hear residents talking about is, when are they going to widen the highway? When are they going to widen the highway? And what we hear and what we see is on the Santa Cruz end, they've expanded lanes there. I mean, you can be driving, you're in gridlock, and all of a sudden it opens up and you can go. But there's no HOV lanes there. Not on that end. It just opens. Why would we put HOV lanes down here? I mean, why wouldn't we just open the highway? Not all highways have HOV lanes. So why would we have HOV lanes?
Yeah, I can get started here, and you can add, Luis. So the projects that were implemented down in North County, the last set of the project goes from Morrissey to Soquel, and that was a set of auxiliary lanes. As far as the Measure D projects, that is funding for 3 sets of auxiliary lanes was what was approved by the voters, and the entire HOV lane project is very expensive because of the interchange improvements that need to be essentially replaced in order to make room for that additional lane. And
so whether it's an HOV lane or just an additional lane, it's still going to cost the same, isn't it?
Correct. It may cost the same, but the available funding is much harder to get, and the trend in our in the funding world is to not fund capacity increasing projects. HOV lanes are an exception.
It's interesting out on I think it's Highway 99 between, say, Sacramento and Yuba City, Marysville. They used to have a 2-lane road. They've just now put in 4-lane road, not just now, but recently. And there are no HOV lanes. It's 2 lanes in one direction and 2 lanes in the other. Why is it HOV would have to be here? I mean, we're not talking 50 miles. We're talking just a few miles. And when I hear residents talking, it's like, what? Why? What are we doing? We're on this side of the hill. We're not on the other side. We're here. Why are we going to have HOV lanes? I'm just asking as an option. People talk to me about that all the time. I hear about auxiliary lanes, and that's supposed to help us. We hear about buses on the shoulders. But one of the things that people want is an expansion of Highway 1, and they want it now. They're tired of every day going through that gridlock. And if you live in North County, you don't have to deal with it. It's the people in the south going north. They want the highway widened. We just have a small group of people here. I'm telling you, we hear it all the time. And everybody that has to go north says, oh, God, I don't want to go to Santa Cruz. I don't want to go there. It's too much, the traffic. We have all the shopping. Everything is north. And people say, no, I'm going over to the hill. I'm going to Gilroy. I'm going to Salinas. They're going to Monterey County. They're not even going to Santa Cruz. It's too much trouble to go through the traffic. Rail's a good option. But the first thing has to be the road. And we can say, we're going to put them on the rail. It's going to be great. But they want the road. We're not the East Coast. We're used to cars here. And, I mean, someday we hope to get there, but we're not there now. And people want just that small section. I don't know, what is it? 10 miles, 12 miles, 15 miles, widen it, and let's go. But I don't know when we're going to get there. It sounds like, it's delayed to 2020. That's a long time. That's 4 years from when they voted this in. To start the project. So I think, Highway 1 needs to be widened. And then what about the Watsonville station? How does that get built? How does that get built? And I'm talking in Pajaro, the train station, where it's supposed to be over there.
Once the decision is made to follow a certain course, then we can go ahead and proceed to try to get funding. It is challenging for this county to fund a project outside of the county because that station will be in Monterey County.
Right.
So it will have to be sort of a joint effort with Monterey County as well. Someone mentioned earlier that in Monterey County they decided, in their tax measure, not to include any money for their rail projects, and not to include
In
any money
Pajaro?
for any rail project. And it was part of what they had to do to get a tax measure passed in their county.
How'd they get Salinas started then?
They had money from other sources, so so they were able to tap into some other funding sources to be able to get the funding for that work. They don't yet have the funding for the Pajaro station, but we have been working with them to try to secure money for that station, and we will continue to do that.
We've got to think outside the box. We have to be visionary. We have to get that station. It's just like the levee project. I mean, you've got San Benito, you've got Monterey, and you've got Santa Cruz County all collaborating. Same thing needs to happen with the rail.
I agree.
I'll stop for now.
Well, thank you very much. There is a TAMSI meeting tomorrow. If anybody's interested, they could go get the answers to the Pajaro station from the TAMSI group. Let's go to Kaufman Gomez.
Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and pass on questions since I am on the RTC and I've had first-hand questions with them. I'll wait for the rest of the council to have conversation as well as the audience. And if there's anything that I feel in a wrap-up, then I'll come back on it.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Garcia right now and then Hernandez, unless Gonzalez returns.
I have 3 questions, and the first one goes to our staff. In terms of your recommendation, in terms of the staff report, you mentioned auxiliary lanes. However, you did not mention a location for those auxiliary lanes. So why was a location not mentioned?
Okay, so there are already auxiliary lanes planned, as we heard about earlier, funded through Measure D, and then so these
but not but not close to Watsonville. It goes to State Park.
Right, and so the auxiliary lanes proposed in this alternative B, plus the new ones, would be south of State Park until all the way down to where it hits 3 lanes again, right? Is that
San Andreas.
the San Andreas
State
Road?
Park to
So it's
San
Park
Andreas.
Avenue to San Andreas.
Okay, and that doesn't need to be mentioned?
Well, we'll clarify it when we do it.
No, I believe it was clarified in the staff report.
And there was no mention of any, because I'm thinking Real Del Mar, San Andreas, La Salva, all those places.
Well, that is after San Andreas. It is 3 lanes already, so we don't need them there.
Well, it stops at La Salva is when it backs up going that way.
Right.
That's where it stops at La Salva.
So okay.
Okay.
You want to explain?
So I can provide some clarification for that. I think it's the 3 sets of auxiliary lanes that go from State Park to Rio Del Mar. That's a really tricky section in there. There's 2 railroad bridges, and then there's another bridge that goes over Spreckles, and there's Aptos Creek. So there's quite a bottleneck in that area between. And the next set of auxiliary lanes would be between Rio Del Mar and Freedom, and then the third set is Freedom to San Andreas.
Okay. So that's where. My next questions. Oh, and of course I just lost them. Hold on, I gotta go back on. Okay. So this is for you. To what extent do you believe a rail corridor will actually ease congestion on Highway 1?
For right now, our ridership numbers that we've have for this study are on the order of 7,000 boardings per day for the rail corridor, and that's not just from Watsonville to Santa Cruz, but that's through the entire line. So really, it's about an option for people to provide another way to avoid the traffic on Highway 1, rather than a major reduction in the number of people who would be on Highway 1 that are changing to rail.
So you're saying even with rail, we'll still have the same amount of cars?
There
On
could
the highway?
potentially be the same level of congestion on Highway 1.
Oh, okay. And my final question, to what extent does the contract with Progressive Rail support passenger rail?
The contract with Progressive Rail is for currently for freight rail service. If the Regional Transportation Commission decides to keep the track in place and follow a path that does that, then the contract will also include recreational rail service or excursion services. And in many places where they do have passenger regular, transit or intercity passenger rail service, they also do run freight service and have other types of activities on a rail line. So it is possible to have various types of services on the same rail line.
So you're saying possible. It doesn't mean probable.
If this community decides that you want passenger rail service, some sort of transportation transit service, and have freight service as well, it can be done.
And the contract with
the contract does not prohibit that.
The contract does not prohibit.
Does not prohibit that. No.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr. Gonzalez.
Well, good evening, everybody. I wanted to put a little perspective to this. From what I understand here, there's 4 scenarios that the RTC Commission will be taking a look at, correct? Right. Now, these aren't set in stone. They can mix and match what exists here, or is the Commission going to be only allowed to select A, B, or C?
We're staff to the commission. The commission are the decision makers, so they can decide what they want to do and rearrange the scenarios if they so please.
Okay, so these aren't set in stone scenarios, so
correct.
We can't get all uptight about this is it. And I think us as a city, we're putting forth what we want to see, and I think it's important. I think rail is important for the city of Watsonville, also. But I do agree with the highway projects that need to be happening. Our community is going to grow. It's unfortunate. This has been going on since almost 1990. Okay, this is not just last year that this process started, and we're looking at probably 2035, right? I mean, for most of these projects to head off, we have a contract with Progressive Rail for how long?
Currently, it's actually for a short period and under phase 1, but if the commission decides to keep the track in place, it'll be for 10 years.
It would just be for 10 years, right? So then after 10 years, we could look for another rail service company to give us service?
After 10 years, if the commission's still keeping the track in place and you want some other type of rail service, yes, you can either do a different request for proposals to get the service that the commission
And then, of course, we would look for funding to help supplement anything like that. And, of course, this is all just options, right? One of the things I don't agree with, though, is I don't agree with funding Mission Street intersection improvements in the city of Santa Cruz. I think the city of Santa Cruz has received plenty of funding to support their own projects, just like the city of Watsonville. I personally didn't support Measure D because I realized that we were going to get shortchanged, that Santa Cruz was going to dictate what was going to go on with Measure D, and like they've done for many years. We talk about expanding Highway 1 for years. When I was a kid, we wanted to grow, but North County, it was a no-growth community. We've been in a no-growth community for many years, and they've chokehold this county, this community, this city, and dictating what they think is best for Santa Cruz County. And I think it's an important time for the city of Watsonville and its representatives to step up and say, this is what we want for our city. And we don't want to wait for somebody else to come and tell us, this is what you need. Okay? Other thing, I just on a little side note, I was at that workshop and I did make some comments there, and I do feel that within our city, we do need to outreach to our community, Latino community. We do really need to put out information to them. I really feel bad right now because I spoke up on behalf of that, and our translator left before this started. And that's really important because she should have stayed here until at least this started and verified that there was not going to be no translation needed here. So in that aspect, I think that we really need to look at our own community and its needs and how we as a city are going to go out and reach our community and inform them. Okay?
We're still on questions.
I know, but everybody else was given an opportunity to comment on their items without being interrupted. So please give me that, at least respect.
Got it.
So on that, so can Mission Street intersection improvements be obsoleted so the city of Santa Cruz can fund their own projects since they do get $1.2 million from Measure D?
If the city of Watsonville is going to recommend a certain set of projects for a scenario to the commission, then you can mix and match any projects that you want to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, that's all I have.
Member Hernandez, we're still on questions.
Yes. I was wondering, out of the 4 scenarios, why didn't all the ones that contain rail include freight service? I'm talking about B. We can still include it, but why wasn't it included from the get-go since we do have customers here?
Yeah. I mean, these are the scenarios that were approved by the commission, as Ginger Dyker mentioned, through going through the process in step 1. And at that time, there was a conversation going on about getting a new rail operator on the line and how that would happen and so on. So at that time, the commission decided to have some scenarios without freight rail service. But naturally, as was mentioned here, things can be added to other scenarios, or if you think a scenario needs a particular item that doesn't include, that can be added. So.
Well, I kind of agree with the B plus to add the freight service. My other question was, who's the traffic engineer that might know this? I had a question about sort of the differences and the criterias for the high occupancy vehicles, the shoulder lane, and the auxiliary. Well, the auxiliary is short; doesn't flow through the whole highway. But what are the criteria needs for those? Like, obviously, I'm not sure, but can the shoulder also contain be an HOV lane as well?
I have never seen the HOV lanes
Like a
on
hybrid
the outside. That would not, if it would run in the auxiliary lane, then you would still bump up against the interchanges. So I'm not seeing how that could work operationally.
Let's talk about the shoulder, though, not the auxiliary.
Have the shoulder work as an HOV lane?
Right.
I
don't know the rules of Federal Highway Administration.
There's a lot of guidelines and requirements from Caltrans in order to have certain types of how things operate, and I can't imagine something like that passing through. I don't know if Marie wants to, or Steve wants to speak more to that, or Maria.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that done, and I think it would have to be something that Caltrans would need to approve. So I think we'd have to defer to Caltrans on that question. That's not a state highway; it's a county road.
So, I guess the next part of it is the how far what kind of lanes are the ones that go up to Capitol State Highway that are planned? Are those going to be HOV lanes or just full lanes, sort of like in Morrissey or SoCal to Morrissey?
So for the Measure D
Yes.
set, those are there's 3 sets of auxiliary lanes that are funded through Measure D, They go from SoCal to 41st because both SoCal and 41st have are constrained in the width that can fit under those interchanges currently, and so it would be an auxiliary lane so that it would come off as the on-ramp comes on. There would be the auxiliary lane, and then it would go off with the off-ramp, and that would be for those three sets.
So for scenario B, would auxiliary lanes all the way up to was it Rio Del Mar or Freedom?
San Andreas.
San Andreas, and then adding the freight service, would something like that work?
That could be a recommendation that the city of Watsonville decides to recommend.
Thank you. This is a question. In any of the scenarios, do the handicapped and disabled have greater access?
Well, we have three different equity measures, and in order to take a look at that, we have the and providing transit service also. So if you look at the amount of transit, there's one of the measures is transit vehicle miles that are available in the different scenarios. That provides access for people with disabilities. Can you think of any other measures?
Thank you. I just didn't know if any of the scenarios had a bonus for disabled or handicapped. You know, by the time any of this gets built, I'm going to be too old to drive.
And also, the trail provides opportunities. The trail that's being planned will provide opportunities for people with disabilities, potentially more as a recreational route. It's a flat trail for the most part, given it's right along the rail right of way. But I think you would probably be looking mostly at the transit services that are provided in the various scenarios. And there is improvements in most of the scenarios on at least 2 out of the 3 routes that are considered here.
Thank you very much. This is a long-awaited time that folks that have come near and far can give us some public input. And so step up to the microphone, tell us what district you live in and where you're from, and share with us your public input, please.
I have to go, but my name is Providence Medrano Alanis, and I am not surprised why there's nobody here to represent the South County. I think that we all have kids to go home to, and we all have things to do, but I gotta go, and I really wanted to stay a little bit longer. I just wanted to ask, if this study is tied to the Progressive Rail contract all the way to Devonport, how will we fix the highway at the Aptos rail bridges? That was my question. I wish I had more time.
Sure, we have a question from the public. Somebody want to try and tackle that? Well, I don't see any answer right now, so let's...
Everybody have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hanging with us. Next speaker, please.
People's Trail now. Thank you for everybody for staying late. Just some real quick facts. Sometimes we have this emotional attachment to trains. Well, if we look at the SMART train in Marin, they actually do 2,000 commuters a day. A single highway lane does 2,000 commuters an hour. Okay, the SMART train is not an effective way of reducing traffic, and it's been shown that the train in the report was $564 an hour to operate. Metro's $200 an hour, and we can't even afford our Metro buses. The problem is, if we vote for scenario B, that's going to kill your widening of highway, because the RTC now is going to focus on the train. If you say we want the train, they're going to kill your highway widening, and you can't do that. We're almost to the finish line. We got the EIR. We supported Measure D. Let's get that, continue with that momentum. Now, the last thing I want to say on the report you'll see is the utilitarian users of the trail. We believe that there's 5,000 utilitarian users, meaning going to work, going to school, commuting, using the trail. That could be about 200, 250 people an hour. We will reduce the impact on the core use of the highway, and that will open up the highway for Watsonville. We need that short-term solution. We need transportation solutions today. We can't wait till 2035. That corridor needs to be open today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Ashley Wynn. I live in La Salva Beach, which is almost part of Watsonville. It's certainly part of the zip code. A year ago, the Improvement Association La Salva studied this issue. We had a trail walk for the segment from Manresa State Beach to the La Salva Beach Trestle, which was just rebuilt a few years ago. We noticed problems with trying to do a rail and trail just in the La Salva segment. They would have to add something to the trestle that they just rebuilt at a high cost. And in order to have a trail in addition to rail there, the organization invited a spokesperson from Greenway and a spokesperson from the RTC to address the issue. After having presentations by both, after members of the public considered the rail feasibility study of the RTC, La Salva the membership voted overwhelmingly against the RTC's rail and trail proposal. Now, the reasons, in part, were that the feasibility study showed, one, that it was going to cost $500 million for the first 10 years to do the rail from Santa Cruz to Watsonville, that it was going to lose $10 to $14 million annually after fares, and three, that their ridership would be rather limited. Now, this wasn't the first feasibility study done. They've been doing feasibility studies since the 80s. Meanwhile, the North County politicians have blocked widening Highway 1 from the late 70s on, when the Caltrans was ready to do it. The North County has been trying to stop growth, impede traffic to Santa Cruz, and if scenario B is adopted or recommended by this council, if you go with scenario B, that's the end of widening the highway. The auxiliary lanes are not going to cut it. They're not increasing capacity. The highway has been artificially restricted for 30 or 40 years by the county. And what scenario B does, it gives the RTC an excuse not to widen Highway 1. Do you want to give that excuse to the RTC?
Thank you very much, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. I'm Miles Ryder. I'm the owner and leader of Driscoll's and Ryder affiliated companies. I think these two companies combined would be, I'm pretty sure, the largest private employer of Watsonville residents. I believe it's a serious disservice to my employees and other residents of Watsonville to be trapped into the time frames and the odd scenario groupings created in the RTC's Unified Corridor study. This complex and not fully reliable study was released less than 4 weeks ago, and I won't do it now, but I can certainly document some of the unreliable elements if people are interested. This study is intended to drive transportation policy for this county for the next 30 years. And given the travel and commute patterns in Santa Cruz County has been pointed out through the evening, the consequence of the decisions made as a result of this study fall disproportionately on Watsonville residents. I see in your agenda a prepared resolution regarding the Unified Corridor Investment Study. It declares support for scenario B with some additions proposed. I urge you to declare instead what you believe would be in the best interests of Watsonville in the near term as well as in the distant future. For example, the commuter rail service contemplated in scenario B will require doing nothing for 10 years, waiting through the Progressive Rail freight contract. Then we have to go out and find hundreds of millions of dollars from the state, which may not have much of that money available by that time with other issues. Then it's going to have to require passing another local sales tax or some form of local tax to fund the ongoing operating deficits, because those are not paid for by the state. And then we still have to replace all the rail lines and rebuild the entire track. And that is in the most recent rail feasibility study. So all these tracks have to come up with or without rail. I would propose what I would think are three things that would be most important for Watsonville. One, meaningful improvements to Highway 1. And that includes dealing with the creek and the rail crossings in Aptos. It's been brought up already. It doesn't happen without dealing with that section of the highway. This bottleneck is the most serious impediment to any real improvement, whether it's full widening, whether it's bus on shoulder, HOV, anything else.
You can go ahead and finish up.
3 more seconds or so.
Sure.
Number two, continued freight service in Watsonville. It does appear that Progressive Rail is serious about creating value in Watsonville, which I hope doesn't include tank cars all through the farmland, which I farm. I look forward to working with them myself and have been in conversations already. And number three, preserve future transportation options for the rail corridor by rail banking. This is a well-established practice used on thousands of miles of rail lines that are unused like ours. If we were to follow Kirkland, Washington's lead, we could remove the tracks and have a trail in place at a very modest cost, no environmental damage, and it could be done in 3 or 4 years, maybe in time for this auxiliary lane thing, which would help relieve some of the traffic that'll get a lot worse during construction. We would actually see the value of a dedicated trail instead of waiting decades and conducting more studies. We can use the corridor now in this way, and it does not preclude in any way at all use of any of the other options, including rail, when funds are available or a different choice is made.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about going over.
That's okay. You waited a while.
Good evening. My name is Sylvia Morales. I'm really tired, but I wanted to stay here long enough to be able to address the issue at hand. And the thing that stands out the most to me is the lack of understanding around these issues on behalf of the City Council. The lack of communication on behalf of Trina Kaufman-Gomez to bring back general understanding on the issues to you as representative on the RTC. I want to address Aurelio Gonzalez and the fact that he mentioned and is aware of the lack of communication to the general public around these issues. The DOT system was not effective in my assessment. How can you rely on dots on a board to measure what the community needs and wants? It just doesn't seem fair. How do you know if the same people didn't vote at 3 different locations for the same thing? It's actually, I was kind of insulted to have been given a dot as a way to represent what I feel this community should have. You insulted my intelligence. You insulted my... I want information. I've been digging for information on my own, attending meeting after meeting, talking to people that have done research on their own. It's not fair to me as a resident. I drive on that highway every single morning. I spend 3 hours getting my kids back and forth to school and myself to work. That I feel it. I feel it I wake up super early to make sure I'm there by 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's something that I'm living every day, and I'm also living with the fact that no one really understands how your lack of understanding impacts people like me that live here and that need to get across the county. So the other thing that I want to mention is I do believe that we need some freight rail service, but we need to be selective about the kinds of customers that we're attracting to our community and making sure that those customers don't add anything negative to this community. I talk to young people that live here, high school kids, they can't get a full-time job in this city. They have to have 2, 3 part-time jobs. There aren't any opportunities here for our young people, and they can't go to Santa Cruz because they don't even have cars to get there. So we're dealing with a poor, undereducated, disenfranchised community. We need to get better at communicating but we need to be able to reach out to them in ways that they can understand, in places they can access. We can't ignore that our government has, from the top down, has made it frightening for some people to enter government buildings. So we can't expect them to show up and put a dot on a paper. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, my name is Tina Andrietta. I live in Aptos, and the rail line is behind the houses right across the street from me. And I have looked at the different Unified Corridor Investment Study, and before coming here, I looked at Scenario B. I like Scenario B or Scenario B plus. Definitely, I can see widening the highway, but we cannot let go of the rail. The rail gives us it's also inclusive in addition to a trail and then Highway 1. It's proactive, it's forward thinking. Let's build it right now. No more delays. I think you all know, right over the San Lorenzo River by the boardwalk, they're expanding a cantilevered, I think it's either 10 feet or 12 feet, to allow walkers and bikers to go across it. So that could happen right over the rail line right over Highway 1. We could do it there. I would love to walk my bike onto a tram or trestle. I go down to Ontario. You walk into these neat trains. The front is open. People with wheelchairs came right in. Women with kids and strollers, they walked in, they sat down, the strollers were right there. The bicycle riders were in front. 2 people came in on wheelchairs, they locked the wheelchairs, and then the chairs for people that can sit were in the back. It was incredible. My girlfriend lives close to Ontario. She goes almost downtown LA to work, and she loves it. So I don't see why we can't do it here. I feel that keeping the rail option open, it's inclusive. I think that's important. I think also I'd love to do that because I volunteer at the Pajaro Valley Art League on Sudden Street. I'd love to put my bike on, get down to Watsonville, get on my bike and go over to the Pajaro Valley Art Council on Sudden. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Scenario B is best for our children and our grandkids. It's best for the people that work in Capitola, Live Oak. They could put their bike on, they could get off and ride a few blocks to work. I think that would be incredible. People who can't afford cars, the gas, the maintenance, all of that. Millennials, no one's talking about millennials. Millennials don't want to drive. Millennials love mass transit. They like light rail. Let's not forget them. Let's respect our elders. I think it's great for our families. Grandparents would love it. So I strongly support whatever option, as long as we keep the rail option. So widen Highway 1, but keep the rail with the trail. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Rob Quinn. I thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I admire your endurance. My daytime job is I'm the Director of Rehabilitation Services at Dominican Hospital, and I serve on the advisory board for the Stroke Center at Cabrillo College, and I formerly sat on the board of the Central Coast Alliance for Health. So I'd like to share a couple of observations with you as you make this decision. The first thing I would raise is why are these options that should be weighed deliberately and costed out bundled together in scenarios that are imaginary? In fact, if you look at the scenarios, the option for Watsonville, the SoCal Freedom, is the same in all the scenarios. So you're essentially being asked to buy the same main course with a different dessert or a different salad. And I think the council here should demand that they have the opportunity to look at these variables independently and decide what's best for them. The second thing is I think we need to applaud the efforts of the RTC to secure this land, to make these plans, and to solicit input. I think that's admirable, and in no way do we want to disparage their efforts. However, when we look at the slides they presented, it's very unclear to me exactly what problems we're trying to tackle. I get on Highway 1 at San Andreas Road. I've been doing it for 22 years, and the drive to Dominican, where the highway magically widens, as it's been pointed out, to 3 lanes, used to take me 13 minutes. It now takes me 48 minutes. That's a huge loss of productivity. There is no other option. I can't ride my bike because SoCal Drive is too dangerous. There's 2 problems that I didn't see addressed. Number 1, transportation from Watsonville to Mid-County. Once you hit the magically widened 3 lanes, there's not a problem. Problem 2, bicycle safety. Worst county in the state. And I don't see that appearing anywhere in the issues. So I'd ask ourselves, what are we going to do about that? In terms of the disabled, I can't pretend to speak for all the disabled. Obviously, I'm intimately involved with many of their lives. The winner of the Sacramento Marathon, open category, in a wheelchair, lives in Aptos. He trains in Monterey. The reason he trains in Monterey is there's a spectacular trail that used to be a rail bed. And the advantage of that trail, there's no other vehicles on it, and it's level. And if you look at the trail that's been proposed here on San Andreas Road, down into Capitola Village and back up again, no wheelchair athlete, even the Sacramento Marathon champion, can do that trail. It is impossible. We need a trail that the disabled can use, can access, and get around our county. We need to get people from South County to Mid-County. We can ask the very diligent people from the RTC who made an excellent presentation to show their slides. And I'll challenge the members of the council here to support option B that shows transportation time from Watsonville to Santa Cruz is slower in option B. So I'll conclude by advocating for the disabled as best I can and by asking this council to look at option B and tell your constituents, hey, we're supporting an option that's going to add time to your commute to North County every day. Thank you for your time and your consideration, and thank you to the RTC for really diligent work and an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Even though I moved here 3.5 years ago, I've used Highway 1 ever since I came to the Central Coast in 1983, first living in Monterey, then Salinas, then Capitola, and now Watsonville. It has never been a really great method to get from one place to another quickly, unless you're traveling about 11 p.m. The one thing else that I've noticed since 1983 in both media and, well, in all media, print media and in electronic media, is that Watsonville has always played the role, for too long, of the poor stepsister of this county, and has accepted its fate as if though it always would take the remaining crumbs, or what was left over. One reason why I advocate Renaissance is because we need to take the shroud off of Watsonville and emerge into the sunlight and recognize all the great human resources and natural resources we have. I agree with Mr. Palmisano. His idea of a recommendation of B+, with some more added changes, is probably the best objective we can get to. It's going to cost a lot of money. Anything we do is going to cost a lot of money, whether it's widening the freeway, whether it's building a wonderful trail, a rail system. But I'll tell you this, what the voters tell me when I'm out campaigning in District 7 is they want it all. They want a trail, a wide one. They want rail system. They want an expanded and more efficient Highway 1 and also repaired as well. And they want their bridges not to fall down. And it's all going to take, again, it's going to take a huge, massive bond issue that's probably going to last 50 years. But you know what? If you're going to invest in your community, if you want a great community, you have to invest in it. So you'll like your children. You have to invest in them in order for them to have a great future. Well, we need to do the same thing in Watsonville. And we need to invest in a transportation system that involves multimodalities for people to get from one place to another. And now that the LA Times has discovered this beautiful city in its July 22nd love letter from the travel editor, all I can say to you is we need to go straight ahead, plow right ahead, look at more alternatives for more transportation, and yes, we should consider passenger ferry service from Santa Cruz Wharf to Moss Landing as well. There are a lot of things we need to consider, and you're right, Nancy, we need to think out of the box. You've told me that more than once, and I'm trying to think out of the box. So I'm hoping all of you will consider B plus with another plus, Mr. Palmisano, and make a few more adjustments. And let's have Watsonville have a full renaissance in terms of transportation needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for sticking with the timing.
Hi, my name's Gail McNulty. I'm the director of Greenway, and I wanted to say I'm a total outsider, not just to Watsonville. I'm an outsider to this whole county. I live about as far away in this county as you can from here. I'm way up in Bonnie Doon, and I'm hoping my kids have put themselves to bed. I called and asked them to do that. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I lived in D.C. I lived in New York. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, we didn't need to have bike to school and work day because, we rode our bikes to school anytime it wasn't snowing, and we walked when it was, because it was a time when it was safer to do so. It was before the automotive industry had been allowed to entirely take over our whole country. It was starting, but it wasn't over, right? The automotive industry, the fossil fuel industry in general is ruling how we do our decisions. And that's unfortunate. I was particularly inspired tonight. Watsonville City Council meetings, I think, are the most fun of anywhere. It was wonderful to celebrate the birthday this evening with the serenade. And Maria's statement was particularly inspiring. I loved how she talked about the history of activism here in Watsonville. And Sylvia Morales, who spoke earlier, she failed to mention that she and her husband, David Morales, along with Fred Keeley, actually traveled to Washington, D.C. to work on that redistricting that helped some of you to have the seats that you have today. So that's super important. And what we heard over and over again tonight, Dr. Bilasich brought up, and other people, many of you did, the fact that there isn't fair representation in this county. And really, that lack of fair representation is what's leading to the problems we have, right? I mean, it was represented here tonight, and it's true. And unfortunately, the RTC and the Metro Board right now are completely underrepresented when it comes to Pajaro Valley School District, the entire South County School District. Do you think that could be part of our problem? Maybe. Now, when we talk about this study that came up tonight, the staff have worked really hard on it. They put a great deal of effort into it. I really wish the high school students that were here earlier had been able to stay this long, because honestly, they're the ones, them and our children and our grandchildren are the ones that are going to be dealing with the issues that we're bringing up tonight. And this study, as a high school teacher, I can tell you, I'm going to give it an A for effort, but more like a D or an F in terms of creativity and courage. We aren't trying with this study. We really need to go back to the drawing board. To pass a resolution tonight saying you support one of these scenarios when none of these scenarios are raising the bar on climate change, even a fraction, none of them are going to help with the gridlock on the highway, and none of them are going to help change the equity balance of this county. So please, I'm not from here. I'm a total outsider. I know you want to hear from people living in Watsonville, but unfortunately it's very difficult for them to be here tonight, as a few people pointed out. Please take the time to let this conversation continue and let some real solutions come up, because your constituents need real solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is...
Well, we don't know who's last yet.
Oh, that's right.
People like coming up one at a time.
Let's go. My name's Greg Becker. I've lived south of La Selva for 40 years. And I know it's late, so I brought visual aids. This is the placard you all may remember from Measure D. look at it, and what do we see? We see a minivan for handicapped, a person walking with a stroller and their child, someone on a bike, and someone in a car. There's no rail. No rail. This was presented to us voters as the scenario for getting California or Santa Cruz moving forward. Okay. They've come up with a plan. It's called scenarios. Here's one of the charts from the scenario, which you won't be able to see. Well, no, let's start with this one. This one shows Watsonville. Oh, excellent.
We're high tech here.
Okay, so what this map shows is how Watsonville is impacted three ways. Three forms of poverty and its minority status. The rest of the county, everybody could do better, but Watsonville is particularly in a bad spot. Overlay these maps, rail line represented there continues, but the bike path continues down Beach Road. And I've asked at the meeting before, who has walked or ridden the bike down Beach Road? It's untenable, and it's slightly an insult, I think, to suggest that as an alternative. So what we have is the Iowa Pacific freight cars or tank cars are out there. And Iowa Pacific isn't in business anymore. So someone has to figure out how to move those tank cars out. And that's a hard task for Progressive because they're not the lessor. They don't have control over who can move the cars or where they can go. But they are going to move them out. And that's so that the Santa Cruz Big Tree locomotives down there at Beach Street, they can move those locomotives out. But then once they're gone, of course, the rail has been repaired. Once they're gone, Progressive will come back with tank cars again. And you say that's not their business model. Can you describe a business model that will work for them? They're going to bring in tank cars, either full or empty. And that's what Watsonville is going to be known for. So I know that all of us love the idea of transit rail, but it's just a bright, shiny object that distracts us from what's really going to happen, which is these greenhouse gas enabling tank cars along 4 miles, 320 cars, and that's something that you'll be voting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Next speaker, too, we're glad to have. We're glad to have all the speakers, whoever else.
Well, my name is Barry Scott. I live in Aptos, and I just want to recall a little more than 3 years ago when the passenger rail study came back. I remember Mayor Hurst, you were there, and I think you talked about Lewis and Clark. And I remember Mrs. Bilicic said something like, "What about Watsonville?" And absolutely, I was thinking, what about Watsonville? My comments then were that you've got to use this rail line. It connects to the rest of the state. It's one of 3 corridors. How could you not use it for moving passengers? So much has changed since then. It's remarkable. We've got the state rail plan. When Caltrans says we've got $144 million dedicated to rail transit, by the way, our population weighted share of that is $1 billion. Do simple math. And it's dedicated to transit. If SB1 dies, some of that goes away, but not all of it. A couple of things I want to set a record straight. I'm hearing some things that I'm pretty sure are incorrect. The Progressive Rail contract does not allow for tank cars coming back in without permission. They have no interest in tank car storage, and an amendment was added to the contract to say that they must get permission to do that. Another thing that I've learned has been floated around is that we would become a toxic waste place. Watsonville would be toxic waste. Look, we live in the coastal section of the most environmentally protected state in the union. If somebody from the Midwest wants to dump something toxic, they'll do it in Nevada or Wyoming or something. It's not going to happen here. So let's, the rail line freight has been there for 140 years? It would have happened by now. So let's let that go. Back to the aspirational stuff, though. Thank you so much for looking at B and adjusting it a little bit. It's remarkable. Like I said, the Caltrans says shifting from highway to railway. You should know that Measure D, I hate to say this, it didn't include highway widening per se. Measure D only included auxiliary lanes, and only in North County. I love the idea of adding auxiliary lanes to make that complete. I love the idea of bus on shoulder. And so great tweaks to Scenario B. Scenario B, and we studied this carefully when it came out, the greatest reduction in collisions, the safest of the four scenarios. Greatest increase in bike and transit user share, a greater share of people using bikes, a greater share of people using transit, the greatest reduction in greenhouse gases. Now, you know, the RTC hired professionals to do this. It's like if you have a medical problem, you go to a doctor, you don't have to trust it, but we could be researching this forever. I thought, yeah, Unified Corridor Study, let's do that. Well aligned with state transportation funding trends, highest scores in every category of economic vitality, connectivity to the state rail network. I don't know if it gets any better than that. Thank you. And I hope you'll all vote for Watsonville and take that first step and say, let's do this. Rail, wider highways, better transit, safer conditions for everyone.
Mayor, I thought he was going to show that video.
Thanks for sticking with us here.
And that video is done by this young man.
Oh, okay.
Hi, City Council. My name is Gray Jameson, and I'm a senior at Alternative Family Education in Santa Cruz. I am also concurrently enrolled in Cabrillo, and I took the bus here tonight. I do not own a car. I do not plan to own a car. And I would like to take transit in this county as much as I possibly can. That is very hard at the moment. It took almost an hour to get here tonight from Cabrillo campus, taking the 71, and that is unacceptable. I have prepared a vision for the future. It is not perfect. However, it is much better than some of the alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You still have 20 seconds left if you want it. We'll just have a moment of silence. That looks like all our speakers for this evening, unless there's somebody else who wants to give it a shot. Come on up. Welcome.
Bill Becker, I'm from Aptos. Lived in Aptos for 19 years, and I'm kind of appalled what the RTC proposed. Let me just explain why. Every day I drive under those. Every day I drive under those interchanges under Aptos where it's all narrowed, 2 lanes each way. When you look at those interchanges, it says 1942. Okay? 76 years later, RTC says, oh yeah, still going to be 2 lanes each way. That's all we can have. And we're just going to have a little auxiliary lane on the side. So here it is. Do you think the population's different since 1942? Yeah, it is. And I'm just surprised on how they're not proposing 3 full lanes the whole way for Aptos and South County, Watsonville. It's so important, obviously, for you, and it's just making it impossible. And to me, it's totally unacceptable, A through E, what they proposed. And, it's not for 1942. And it's, time to propose something different.
Well, thank you very much. Anyone else wish to address the council on this issue? Seeing no one headed for the podium, we'll turn this back to the council for their further discussion and see what they want to do with this. Council? Councilmember Garcia.
My question is actually to the city manager. This is a draft and not the final version. And this draft scenario B really, in my opinion, doesn't benefit Watsonville to its full capacity. So my question is, as was stated by the members from RTC, the commission can mix and match and change whatever. And so if the final draft by the RTC has a proposal that gives more benefits to Watsonville, how will our acceptance of this draft affect that?
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. I think the question before the council tonight really is twofold. The first is the council interested in weighing in on the process, on the draft, prior to the RTC commission making a final decision, which is coming up in November, and a final decision in December? And if the answer to that is yes, then the next question is, what is that recommendation? The staff has brought forward a proposed scenario B with some modifications. And as we've mentioned earlier tonight, it's the council's decision as to whether you want to accept the proposal in front of you with the 2 modifications that are there, make other modifications to that with other recommendations, or choose not to take a position at this time. And that's certainly within the council's authority to do so. We thought, given the importance of the issue for Watsonville residents, it was incumbent on us to bring the option to the council to provide that policy direction. But the council could certainly make the decision tonight that the scenarios in front of you, even with modifications, are not of interest. Or come to some agreement around, based on the recommendations we're making tonight, with other modifications and weigh in on the process. And really, those are the options in front of you this evening.
Thank you.
Good. Well, I think it's behooves the council to take an opinion one way or another, because otherwise you're just going to get what you get at the RTC, and you don't know what that's going to be. I think it's important that we express an opinion, and they may listen to us and they may not listen to it. This is only kind of advisory to the RTC, and it is important that we have some kind of statement or opinion, I think. Mr. Dutra.
Thanks. You said earlier tonight that you spoke to Capitola, Santa Cruz. You spoke to the city of Santa Cruz today, and then I think you said maybe the county. Did they take a position?
The city of Santa Cruz did not take a position today. The city of Scotts Valley we presented to last week, and they did not take a position. The city of Capitola meeting will not be until November 8th, I believe. They did not have room on our agenda for our earlier meeting. But the city of Santa Cruz will likely take a position in a couple of weeks.
In the county?
The county is the county supervisors are on our commission, so we're not meeting with them, the district supervisors, separately, since they're already part of our commission.
Okay. Did they say why they didn't?
The Metro we will be meeting with this Friday, and I have not heard whether they plan on taking a position or not. We've had the only other, if I may state this, you may be interested. There are RTC advisory committees have taken a position.
Okay. And did they say why they weren't taking a position? Like, why didn't Santa Cruz take a position? Why didn't Scotts Valley take a position?
Scotts Valley put it on their agenda as information only. We have not been directing city councils in one way or another. It's obviously up to your discretion on how you want to proceed with giving a position or not.
Okay, and then I just was clarifying because I was listening to everybody. Really, I want to say thank you to everybody who came out tonight. I mean, it's really nice to hear all sides of the topic. I really do wish there were more people here from Watsonville. It really we fill this council room when there are other topics, and sometimes we fill both rooms. So the fact that no one is here on this topic is really making me kind of question the importance of this project to the community. So I heard someone say earlier tonight that the Sonoma train serves 2,000 passengers, and the Santa Cruz would service 7,000. Is that correct?
That's the estimate from the study and from the rail feasibility study, on the order of 7,000 boardings.
7,000 boardings. So it's quite a bit more. And then I in our community here, so many people depend on their vehicle to get to work, and a lot of times they're in construction. We are a working class community down here, and thinking that people can put their tools on a train, which in theory is great, it's just not going to work. I mean, I know many people who travel over to San Jose that need their vehicle, that are electricians, that are plumbers. I mean, these are people, this is our community. Our community's changing. I don't know if that's what it's going to be in 10 years. We may be a breakfast community. My neighbor just sold his house for $725,000 cash to someone from Santa Clara. There are two people on my street that were born in Watsonville. This is the future of our community, and I don't know what to, it's bound to happen. I don't know, but a woman came up to me the other day and said, "We're really looking forward to the rail going down to Watsonville." That way, and then she was from Santa Cruz, and I said, "Oh, really?" She goes, "Yeah, a lot more of us can move down there then because it's cheaper to buy the houses, and we can take the rail up to work." And I looked at her, I couldn't believe she said that to me, and maybe that's the future of our community. I'm seeing it already happening in my neighborhood. I just saw this this post on the website on the web with showing gentrification in Santa Cruz County, and the area that I live in was pure purple, and it was gentrification happening. And I just told you that there are only two people on my street of houses that are from Watsonville. So that what I looked at was true, and so I'm trying to help protect this community, protect and I need it, and I want to do what's right for it. What I do know is this: I'm completely supportive of widening our highway. I know that a lot of our working class people depend on that highway every single day, and I sit on the board for Metro. I know how hard it is to get grants. We're barely surviving. We were on a fiscal cliff, so we can't sit here and say that it's really easy to run Metro, and to add more routes is going to be very difficult unless we get more funding. We have two-thirds of our buses still need to be replaced. We have bus fires all the time. We are trying to get people up and down this county. The 91X that went to Cabrillo was almost lost until the Cabrillo students stepped up and charged themselves a fee so that we can keep the 91X going to Cabrillo. We cannot continue to live in a fantasy land of what is exactly what is reality and what is a future maybe idea of what we want our community to be. I need to act. I need to act in the now, and I know that what's important to our community is the highway. I'm really happy that the city of Watsonville has been thinking outside of the box when it comes to creating the trail system. I think it's great, and I know that our people do use it. I know that we have funding set aside for the first part of the trail, and down here in Watsonville, and I think that's great. I'm a huge supporter of the trail and want the trail to get done. I also want to make sure that we are thinking of the people that live here. And when you think of a vision, you're thinking of years out, 10 years. What's the community going to look like? And I don't know what the community is going to look like here in 10 years. I can only tell you what's happening now. And if it continues, it's going to look completely different. So, I mean, this is a very, difficult a difficult decision to make, and we're held here at Leaders, and we're only making a recommendation. Sylvia Morales came up earlier and said we aren't informed enough to make a decision. These questions were making us, really look like we just were not well versed on the subject, and she's probably right. I mean, a lot of us, probably didn't have one-on-ones with either the city manager or their staff or the RTC to completely go through a lot of these questions. I have concerns about the cost of this. I know how much it costs to ride the bus, and we're actually going to be now. It's going to be coming to us to raise fares again, and that's the reality for Metro buses. Is fares are going up. So the fact that prices are going down on trains, I can't. I don't know, but I do like the idea of the train. I mean, I think it's cool. I go to big cities and you're riding. You're doing light rail and you jump on it and it's taking you from place to place. So I really like that idea. I think it's efficient. But with that idea, I mean, are we going to lose? Can you successfully do a rail and a trail next to each other? Are there going to be gaps? I mean, is there? Because from what my understanding is that you can't do a complete rail trail. That there will be gaps. Is that correct? Like especially around bridges?
The current plan is to have in the long term is to have the trail next to the rail. In the Unified Corridor Study, we did identify a couple of locations that would potentially be protected facilities along a roadway. The Capitola, so part of the Unified Corridor Study assumed that Capitola Trestle would not, there would not be, for the trail next to rail, would not go across the Capitola Trestle. There's been a lot of conversation in our community about whether that's really the direction that the commission should make, whether maybe that decision will be changed, that Capitola Trestle will be prioritized for replacement. It would include a trail facility along with that replacement bridge. But as far as your question goes, the long-term vision is definitely for the trail next to the rail. There's a couple siding locations where potentially the trail would have to move off. There's a couple locations, as you know, in Watsonville that is the roadway, so that wouldn't change. The trail would still be along the roadway on Walker Street. There's also the location in near the boardwalk, Beach Street, but that's envisioned as a protected facility.
And does the measure in Capitola, if that passes, will it kill this project?
I do not see that measure passing, killing this project. No.
Okay, so because there are rumors out there saying that if this passes, then it's going to it's the end of the rail.
If I might add to that, the measure in Capitola, would be an advisory measure, and it would what the Capitola residents might decide. But the rail line right away is owned by the Regional Transportation Commission, so it's up to the Regional Transportation Commission to decide what happens with the rail lines, regardless of a measure passing in Capitola. And as Ginger mentioned, the long-term vision is that the trail would be on a trestle through Capitola. In the short term, I had visibility, but the long-term vision is that it would be on some sort of bridge going through Capitola. The original master plan for the trail, at that time, Measure D wasn't part of the picture, so it was difficult to see where there might be funding for replacing that bridge. But with Measure D, that becomes a possibility, and the Regional Transportation Commission did provide funding to start looking at the feasibility of replacing that bridge over Capitola so that it can accommodate both rail and trail. So we'll be doing that.
And I heard one of the speakers tonight say that this rail is going to lose $10 million annually.
They may have been referencing the rail feasibility study, and the way that the rail feasibility study was trying to look at how, if the project could meet the fare box recovery ratio. So it was looking at the minimum fare. As I mentioned earlier, we looked at a fare that was comparable to what we thought was seen with the different zone fare systems in the Clipper card in the Bay Area. So we were trying to provide something that was similar to what we were seeing in other areas with rail transit service. I think being on Metro, you understand the difficulty of funding operations and maintenance for any type of transit, and that's certainly something every transit agency evaluates. The current estimate for the maintenance and operations on the passenger rail ranges from around 14 million to 16 million annually. And depending on the scenario, the fares that are generated range. And so, yes, the fares would not be expected to cover the total cost of operations and maintenance, which is also true for Santa Cruz Metro.
Right. But if we know that Santa Cruz Metro, we are covered because we have a half-cent sales tax. We also depend on Measure D and SB1. So we have a county tax to subsidize our Metro.
That is a very great benefit to the Santa Cruz residents, that our county has supported a countywide sales tax dedicated to transit. And additional funding, local funding or state and federal funding, would be needed to implement these scenarios, as was shown in the slides earlier today. So it's not assumed that the fares would cover the cost of all of the new transit services, nor the rail service. If you look at the scenarios, there's significant new local bus service that's also proposed.
Right, and so that's what I'm saying is that it's you would have to tax the voters. Since we tax the voters already for the buses, if a train would come in, they would have to tax the voters again. I mean, I know how hard it is to get grants. We work very hard at Metro. This year we were not successful with getting any grants for our buses. The year before we got a few million. It's not like, yes, there may be pots of money. That's how, but the fact to think that you're going to automatically get it, that's not how it works. So it's important to make sure that we're realistic with the funding. Yeah, and that's just kind of where my concern is I just want to make sure that we don't get in over our heads. And honestly, I think this is up to the voters to decide. And I wish someone would get it on the ballot so we can just end this conversation. So, and to just see if the Senate, let the voters decide if they want to tax themselves to have a train. And that way we're not all fighting with each other. Let the people vote, right? Let the people vote. I'm done for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bilicich.
Well, first of all, I want to, I agree with you when you said this is our opportunity to have an opinion. And I'm afraid that if we don't have an opinion, then it's just going to happen to us. It may happen to us anyway, but at least if we can come through with something, that's a start in the right direction, in my opinion. So, number one, I think we need to widen the highway. That's a priority here in South County. The highway needs to be widened. However you convey that to the group, whether it's the Board of Supervisors, the whole panel, whoever it is, we need to widen the highway. Auxiliary lanes are great. If they can get a third lane, that's even better, but not this HOV stuff. Just a plain old lane. and then we talk about the rail. There's no way we should remove the tracks at this point. We don't know what's going to happen. Should we have a train? I take the Capitol Corridor all the time. And from San Jose to Sacramento, I like it. It's great. You just get on, you ride, you don't have to do anything. They do it all for you. That little video that was made, that's really, it's future. Trains aren't going, we don't know what they're going to be like. Are they going to be electric? I mean, what is it? We don't know. But something like that would be, I could see that in our community. I could see it being, progressive, different. Do we need freight? Well, we have some businesses here that do need freight. I don't understand why we had to have 10 years, what that part was. I don't know about that piece. But we need some kind of freight rail here for our businesses. These are big companies that work here, that are here, they've been here, so we can't just say we're not going to have rail. I think the trail, people talk about the trail. There's room for the trail and the rail. So let's make it happen. I want it all. There's no doubt. Because I hear people talking about the road. We cannot ignore the road in South County. We cannot just say, oh, we're going to just do rail or we're just going to do trail. People are not going to get 20 miles to Santa Cruz walking or biking. It's not going to happen. They're going to work. They need to get in a car. And like I said, I know on the East Coast they have, rail, they have subways, half the people don't have cars, but that's not here. We have cars. And Highway 1 has to be a priority. The bus on the shoulder, hey, if that's an option, make it happen. But we can't just ignore the highway. That has to be the priority, number one. Number two, I would not remove the tracks. And like I said, we need the freight. And the future, I can see rail, whether it's the smart train or I don't know what that one we just saw. That was I like that too. But we have to think of the future. What's it going to look like? It doesn't have to be, the old steam engine. It doesn't have to be. We can have something new and modern. We don't know. Future, we don't even know the future. We're not, it's hard to think. When you think of all these people that have thought outside of the box, and they've come up with all kinds of solutions. And I don't know if we are, well, it has to be this way or it has to be that way. We need to figure it out. And for Watsonville, number one has to be the highway. Number one is the highway. And, the rail and the trail, that's got to happen too. We need it all down here because we're not connected to Santa Cruz. We can't be connected because people go the opposite way. They don't want the traffic. Even going to the courthouse over there. It's going to, okay, now how long is it going to take? Well, so I don't know. Am I going to make it on time? It's going to take an hour, hour and a half. Oh, gosh, now I'm stuck in traffic. I don't know. There's panic all the time when you talk to people about going to Santa Cruz. They don't like it. I've got people, I have the adult school from Watsonville to Santa Cruz. And for me to get staff that wants to work and go to Santa Cruz, oh, no, I don't want to go there. Oh, come on, I need somebody over there. Well, I'm going to have to leave at, 7 or maybe 6:30. I said, well, yeah, but you don't have to be to work until. No, but I have to go early. I want different hours. People don't like the traffic. They don't like it. And, that's where we are. We have a lot of people here. A lot of people love our county. It's a great place to live. We live in one of the best places in the world. Look at our climate. We don't have to worry about tornadoes and hurricanes. Big storms. We don't have that. We've got this ideal place. And so I'm recommending, and I don't know, council, maybe, it's getting late, but if we could go with widening the highway, not remove the tracks, have the freight train, look at the future with a smart train or some kind of train, and have the trail and go forward. I don't know. What do you think?
Member Garcia? Thought? Gonzalez?
Yeah, I got a few words. Actually, yeah, I do want to comment on this. For 27 years, I commuted up to the Bay Area. For 18 years, I commuted to San Francisco, Walnut Creek. I got to see the freeways get expanded and get expanded. I got to see them go from 3 lanes to 6 lanes. I got to see them get filled up. I got to see myself leaving earlier and earlier in the morning. I was able to leave at 5 in the morning, then 4 in the morning, and then 3:30 in the morning to be able to get to my destination. I know we want to expand our highway, and we think that that's going to help us out and relieve. But unfortunately, the old cliche says we make it wider, there's more cars that are going to be on it. HOV lanes in the Bay Area, you see single riders on them. It's no longer two riders. They don't care about it. The highway patrol don't pull you over no more because there's so many of them. So the freeways are packed. You go from 680 from San Jose on 680 to Walnut Creek. It takes you 2 hours sometimes. So I've lived it. I've gone through it. I'm glad I'm retired and I don't have to do that no more. And so I understand the hurt that people have here, just the basic little commute that they have from here to Santa Cruz. And I call it basic because, I mean, when you're on the road for 2.5 hours, 3 hours, sometimes 4, that's a commute. And that's a lot of time off your life. You look at the future and you don't know what's going to behold you. But sometimes I envision things, and this might be really far-fetched, but I see electrical vehicles driving around Watsonville. I see electric trains going around to the agricultural areas, being able to drop off the workers there. I see electric vehicles being able to pick up produce and deliver it to trains. This is what I see happening in the future. It may be really far-fetched. I see bicyclists. I see people walking. I don't see our freeway, Highway 1, going beyond 3 lanes. Okay? We have a lot of options to do. Right now we have to look at what we got in front of us. It's going to take a few years to work all this out. We can start with our trail, okay, and look at our rail. Don't get rid of our rail, but look at our bike trail and get those going. Get with areas where we can get those moving. I think we should move on those. I don't think we should need to be waiting to keep continually surveying and looking and taking opinions from people, because I mean we've been doing it for so many years now. And so I support scenario B, but I don't support on scenario B the mission intersection improvements, because again, and I'm going to reflect back to Santa Cruz has received almost $1.2 million, and the city of Watsonville is $900,000. You know, I think they should be able to use their funds for their city, and then that'll relieve RTC to be able to use funding that's going to help our area more and Highway 1. We just need a simple pedestrian walkway for our students over Highway 1. It's been over 10 years. We haven't been able to get a simple pedestrian walkway over Highway 1 for our students. And I think that's a priority, to be able to move on items like that. So as far as this goes, I think we should make the recommendation, and I think the council is responsible. And the other point of view is that we do have a representative on RTC. And I think it's important that she understand, because it is Trina Kaufman, that where we stand as a group and where we support her, so she knows what she needs to be standing up for, and what we're expecting from our representative that's on the RTC. And so I'll give her my backing with scenario B, but without the mission intersection improvements. Thank you.
Mr. Hernandez?
You know, I was gonna say I'm with the scenario B plus with the added freight service, and I wanted a little bit of clarification. They said that there's no funding for just lanes, but there was funding for HOV lanes. Is that what was stated?
There's a general trend that there's less money out there available for just general purpose lanes, any capacity increasing with the exception of HOV lanes. Some of the money that comes through Senate Bill 1, the Congested Corridors Program, provides funds for HOV lanes but would not provide funds for just another general purpose lane.
If in our B plus scenario we added the HOV lanes, it would be more plausible.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If in our scenario B plus, if we added the HOV lanes, it would be more plausible or more likely to get funded?
HOV lanes in comparison to general purpose lanes would be more likely to get funded in the future. there is no project on this list to look at just adding a general purpose lane.
Right. It was mentioned here on the council, though.
But you could.
I'd be good with HOV lanes if we can get that. That would,
Well, if we can't get the other ones, I mean, HOV is better than nothing.
Right. And it could get funded.
And, well, I mean, but I would like to see the general lanes first. It's kind of like Aurelio said, HOV or not, they don't care anymore. They'll start here and they'll pay attention for a while and then forget it.
What you will see with the HOV lanes is that the people that are driving in general purpose lanes that do have 2 or more people in the vehicle will move over to HOV lanes, so there will be improvement for people in the general purpose lanes as well.
It'll encourage people to get electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles too.
Well, now they're changing some of those rules too, because too many people have them. We can't win. But I really think we need. I think you're hearing them say too that the highway is important. Mission Street, forget it. I'm with you.
Is auxiliary lanes included in
Auxiliary lanes are included. Yep.
In the funding?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he said they were going to go down to San Andreas.
Funding wise, though.
Mm-hmm. That's what he said.
Yeah. HOV lanes.
Yeah.
No.
Is it just HOV lanes or is auxiliary lanes?
Oh, he said auxiliary.
Let's just have one at a time speakers. I think Felipe still has the floor unless he's done.
I'm done.
That's good to hear.
My question.
Thank you.
I'd rather prefer HOV lanes if it's more plausible for it to get funded in the future.
And
Thank you.
And the funding is available or it is possible to get the funding for auxiliary lanes. They do qualify for the funding sources because they're not considered a capacity increasing project. It's an operations project.
That's even an improvement than what was originally proposed. Everything was going to stop at State Park Drive. So now we're down to San Andreas. So that's a positive thing. Thank you. And I want to tell you too, I really appreciate you coming and presenting and listening to us. Because, we're not sure either. Nobody's sure. But we're trying to listen to our constituents and trying to make everybody happy. It's very difficult. But thank you for hanging in with us tonight.
Mr. Dutra?
Thank you. I know it's getting late, but this is an important topic. I do have to agree with Aurelio and Dr. Bilicic. That's a little annoying that, we're the same size as Santa Cruz and there's not one project like for Watsonville in there, but yet there's something for Santa Cruz. So, this just kind of reflects the kind of treatment that we've received for many years, and I do agree that I will not be supporting that project in any scenario, especially since there's no representation of any other project for Watsonville.
Well, thank you very much. I'm also in agreement with council on these issues. I've traveled all over the world and walked on all kinds of narrow, muddy trails, rode my bicycle uphill both ways, and rode on the high speed and the smart train as well. And I remember when we were on the smart train in particular, the freeway was completely gridlocked, completely locked, wasn't moving at all, and we're flying by, and the train was full. And people had their bicycles on the train too. And there were handicapped people on the train, and there were elderly people on the train. And so it was an important thing rather than just a toy that people dreamed up. And so, I agree that I would like it all as well, but I also remember the political realities of the 80s and the 90s where we were shut out by our friends on the west side of Santa Cruz who had the levers of power, and they could bring them right back again, and they might with the RTC, who knows. So the least we can do is make a recommendation as strong as we can on behalf of the people of Watsonville, and we need to follow it up with the RTC and our friends in North County and Mid County as well. And so let's hear from Council Member Kaufman Gomez, our representative on the RTC, and maybe we could put this to bed.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been doing a lot of the fact-finding when it comes to listening to what all of the comments are that have come through. And there's some things I want to clarify, and then there's some things that I'll give you a bit of a history lesson on, because there's a lot of assumptions of why aren't we doing things that the RTC process has already ruled out based on efficiency or land use capabilities. The first being one of the comments coming up that I'm not communicating effectively. Not only is that a misnomer, I'm providing a lot of documentation that I've synthesized to simplify the matter to give to my peers that are up here. I have had my door open for anybody from the public to reach for me, to go ahead and sit with me, which I've done for hours on end over this particular topic that you need to realize that I just got started in March myself. So there's been a huge learning curve on my part. It's been a lot of participation on my part to make sure that I have been accessible to not only my council, to my constituents, and the community at large. Because I'll tell you, I'm getting a lot more comments from a community at large than I am from my own community here in Watsonville. And what I have tried to encourage is the emphasis of the road show. I mean, it's got to be significant because we know that we don't get attendance here. We don't have people showing up at 6 o'clock for workshops because they're on the road trying to get home to their families, especially if they're on the Highway 1 corridor. I have outreached over to the PVUSD school district. I've given them our agenda topic tonight and made the recommendation that we get the slideshow going from RTC to them to see if they can put something at least mentioned on the Board of Trustees, because I know that was one of the comments that were made out there for suggesting that we get a hold of that. I've spoken with the chancellor over at Cabrillo College as well, and his interest in making sure that he can get it to the students, because we can see that this is an opportunity for the youth of Watsonville to make it mid-county to North County with opportunities that they don't have available here as a resource in our community. So it's important that we talk to those that will be our passengers and that are the youth of the future that will be using these modalities, that are asking for other options than being in the parking lot of Highway 1. So we have a lot of things to prioritize. We also need to make sure that we're keeping in mind in the forefront the priorities that the voters approved on with Measure D. Measure D is here. We're looking to go ahead and supplement that with the SB1 funds, which are in jeopardy. And we want to recognize Watsonville has made a tremendous sacrifice for the amount of money Measure D is giving us to these projects, which means that the emphasis needs to prioritize those which will have the most effect on the impact Highway 1 is providing us with. So we have 3 ancillary lanes that were approved as a result of Measure D that have to be a priority and have to be brought up on what's our update every time RTC meets, so this information gets disseminated back to our community that made that vote happen, because we did do a tremendous sacrifice. And we didn't have any of the pork belling going on that happened elsewhere, which could be considered the Morrissey project, the Mission Street project, as opposed to nothing else that we have in here it's an extra boost to us. We know that this community needs this freight. Watsonville has been a viable community that has relied on freight for generations, and we don't want to lose the fact of what our options are. This B having, a blended option of freight, we cannot lose that. We cannot lose that for Watsonville. We cannot have the fear of tankers sitting in Watsonville stop us from the industry the Watsonville community business owners need to thrive for their businesses, with an opportunity to do some expansion from their businesses and new interest. Miles, I know you've got new interest in this, and the Martinellis, there's new interest in this, and we want to be able to foster those relationships for that freight that Watsonville needs, that will help in the opportunity of economic development this community's been asking for. It's a resource. We need to be able to use that resource. A bit of the history lesson. The thing about we're making a haste decision. Let me squelch that right now. Right now, I'm going to tell you that this has been going on since the 80s. In 1990, Proposition 116 was approved, and part of that was the money to go towards this particular corridor. We've gone through Proposition 108. We've gone through the Rail Authority for future development of this branch line. That was in 2000. We've already had a preliminary report on this in 2005. We've had another one in 2011. We've had a lot of ups and downs with their economy between 2008 and whatnot, so there have been some things that have stagnated as a result of our economy in general. We've talked to the Surface Transportation Board. This has to do with our rail line. That was in 2012. We've also had the RTC letter from the rail administration of what's going on here. We've had a rail feasibility study in 2015, and it talked about some of the cost factor of putting the rail and the transit opportunities on there. We've had a Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail EIR report in 2013 that also indicated the support of rail for that particular corridor. This corridor ultimate goal is to stretch from Monterey County all the way to San Mateo County. Watsonville has a huge center hub to that opportunity here that we don't want to relinquish. We have, of course, the Measure D that's going into this. As of 2018, we have a rail plan here. In the rail plan, it reads, the 2040 vision supports establishment of regional rail network on the Central Coast, providing connections from Santa Cruz, Monterey, and Salinas to the state network at Gilroy, with the possibility of different train routings to allow Santa Cruz to Monterey service, providing for transportation capacity in the constrained coastal Highway 1 corridor. We know that we need active freight. We are looking at this as an option for commuter service between Santa Cruz and Watsonville to be able to allow the interconnections for the passenger. We've been talking about or have comments that, well, that's not where everybody's at. We've got the first mile before and after. It will allow more opportunity for the trails to be put to more effective use if we've got the mile to 3/4 of a mile to get to the train, to take the bike on the train to get them to their end mile use. To have this as an opportunity so we have more of our youth to be able to get to Cabrillo College, to be able to get over to the UCSC campus is an opportunity that we need to have, especially in an underserved community where we have, in the quote from what we heard out here was transportation disadvantaged. We are a transportation disadvantaged community when we are putting people on this highway and they're spending 3 hours of each day on top of their 40-hour work week of just getting to and from for a household to be able to afford a living here. So these are issues that we have here. They're not going to go away. We will get some relief on the projects we have on one. We need to be able to prioritize them. We've discussed HOV lanes, which I think is a very reasonable approach to look at this. I know we physically have constraints on how wide we can do it, which creates this bottleneck that we have. We are not overlooking the opportunity for the corridor to be used for any of the cycle opportunities that are out there. We are not going to have it reasonably expected for a family that is in the service industry in Watsonville to take a bicycle to work at the hotel industry or the other industries of service need that commute from Watsonville to attend. Even for those that work for the boardwalk, it would be an opportunity that they don't need that vehicle on the highway. We will be able to do a lot of relief with alternative modes of transportation that are here. The need to ease the traffic congestion, the rising demand for complete communities. The rail supports the compact land use. We're talking about housing. We're talking about this housing demand and the housing crunch. We have right now 8,600 people per square mile within just our city limits. We have the density factor that's used as a result of a lot of these other corridor studies and the transportation modality options that are out there in terms of the possibility of the use for that kind of density that's here. We need to improve the connectivity because Watsonville feels isolated. We've always felt like we are the sister city of this particular county, and we have not had that voice. I am that voice to represent this community on the RTC, and I'm not taking this voice lightly. I'm not taking this vote lightly, and I'm not doing it just to go ahead and rubber stamp what everybody thinks that's going on here. I have done my research on this. I have listened to Greenway. I have listened to the community as a whole, and I've asked for a lot of different questions. Even just this particular study, I gave the RTC 6 pages of questions. They're going to be using an FAQ to get back to the community on the questions and concerns that have come out as a result of this corridor study. And I'm not just short of the questions that are going there. So I'm not taking this job lightly for my high paying, above my pay grade kind of position here. This is for the community as a betterment. It's a decision that's going to be transcended into many generations to come. We're not rushing it when we're going in and being this thorough. We know that it takes investment, that we don't have the blank check to write for all of these things to be completed all at the same time. We know that we also need to make sure that all of these items are taken care of. We need to include what we're prioritizing here on this particular list that the staff has gone through thoroughly, has discussed with me as well as with council on the presentations. I do concur about prioritizing one pork belly project that's in Santa Cruz versus not anything from the Watsonville. So I would recommend with this Watsonville that we do stand up. We do have this voice, and we can be the first voice out of the county with the cities that are wanting to go ahead and have that call made, and that it isn't just me that's saying it. You're hearing it from the dais up here, that all of us are looking to have something that's going to relieve this. I don't need to be threatened over tankers. I don't need to be threatened over things that I should know because it's not my job to know on some of these items, and I have to rely on the experts. The experts for this particular study aren't going off of just their opinions that are coming from their desk. This comes from the depth of the reports that are out there. What I would like to do is to make sure that that we have in support of Prop 6 coming in for the no on the 6 to keep the money going. I want to make sure that I put a motion together that we do approve this particular resolution for the support of the B+ plan, but also to be sensitive to the recommendation of their council members that we remove the Mission Street as a recommendation, that we make sure that HOV is considered as an option, whether we have the width of it versus the bus lanes, the bus on shoulder options. I know that those are a little bit more economical for us to do, but we don't give up the hope for what Watsonville needs for the representation, for the transportation modalities, and to do what relief and efforts we can have that will better our community here and the stakeholders that rely on that, and not to give up on anything that we're dealing with the trail system. We have 33 miles worth of trails that we've adopted for Watsonville. It's only expanding. We're going to be able to tie that in to this big picture throughout the county and be able to enhance what we have here in terms of our tourism industry that comes here for birding, that can take these trail systems to Watsonville, and to really give the heart to what the article was that was in the LA Times. These are opportunities that we do have here that I don't want to overlook the fact, and being able to have the support behind me from my other council members as a body to make this decision. So that is my recommendation, to again approve this recommendation of staff, include HOV, make sure that we are prioritizing our auxiliary and emphasizing the Measure D commitments, removing the Mission Street work, and to make sure we have regular updates on the timeline for these projects that will relieve what Watsonville needs on those Highway 1 items. That's my motion.
I'll second it.
And the freight, which is
motion by Kaufman Gomez. I think the second was by Garcia Gonzalez. Second by Gonzalez. More discussion on the motion, Mr. City Manager.
So thank you, Councilmember Kaufman Gomez. Just to restate, so we're really clear on the motion, and to condense it down a bit. So it would be a recommendation for scenario B+, which already includes the buses on the shoulders, with the addition of HOV lanes and the removal of the Mission Street improvements.
That is correct.
Can I ask for some clarification here?
Yes.
I'm looking at scenario E. So if you are going to add HOV lanes, you may just want to take a quick look and see if scenario E really represents better your recommendation rather than scenario B with those changes.
I think after the staff have evaluated this as well as the council, and from what we're hearing from the consensus of the community, B is the option that we'd like to still remain on the priority with, and then enhance it with these other options. We do need the freight. We know it wasn't part of B, so those are the things that we want to make sure that we're including. I don't think that there's enough on E for what we've evaluated.
I think the council's spoken here so far. Let's see, Dutra had his hand up, and then Bilicic. We're on the motion.
So I know when we passed Measure D back 2 years ago, preserving the rail, just the preservation of it until the future could be decided of it, was what the voters voted on. I personally believe that this needs to go out to the public to make the decision, and it should be done sooner than later so that we can move on. I think that if we pulled the rails right now, then that if the public decided that's what they wanted, then it would be too late. So I feel that we do need to move the trail. If I sat on the RTC during the vote, if this came in January or another time, I'm just going to still keep an open mind to decide how I would vote at that time on the reality of the entire project, because I do need to learn. I do want more answers on cost, how much this is really going to cost the residents to be taking it up and down. I think that there were a lot of questions that just we couldn't find complete answers on. I want to look more into the speed and if it's really efficient. And so there are a lot of questions that I still have on the rail, but to send a recommendation without those being answered, and I would not be doing my due diligence for this. I think this is all premature. I don't see any other city acting, but I understand what the city of Watsonville wants to act. So at this time, I will be supporting this, and will be continuing to learn, more, or having more of my questions answered between now and the final vote in January or whenever it ends up being, if it's not postponed even further.
Okay, we're on the motion. Councilmember Garcia.
I have a question. Since HOVs were added, buses can go on HOVs, can they not?
Correct.
And so then there would not be any need for buses on shoulders, or is that something different?
That's the way I would see it, yes.
Yeah.
I think you left it open enough that they do all these research on different. They're gonna come out with numbers.
I'm not saying we've talked this to death, but let's let Dr. Bilicic have a word here.
Well, I mean, we have it right here. It's
Good.
alternative B plus. We're talking about widening the highway. We're talking about not removing the tracks. We're talking about having freight. We're looking at the future, whether we have a smart train or whatever we have. We want the rail and the trail. I'm particularly not in support of HOV lanes because I think we just need a third lane and have the buses on the shoulders. But saying that, I will support whatever to get this going because we know we want that highway expanded, and we're all in agreement.
Okay, let's call the vote, okay?
I just had one brief comment.
Oh, go ahead.
And again, sorry.
Sure.
I waited until everybody finished.
Please,
Okay.
you're right.
So the
You're
brief
right.
part of it is that if we don't say yes to move forward, we can't continue finding all of these answers out regarding where the money's going to come from, what the cost factor is, what the voters need to come back on if we need to take something out to the vote. So that's why we're moving it forward, so that those kinds of questions can then be addressed and further researched.
Good job. Let's call for the vote.
The clock says 12:12, and I say yes.
Hoffman Gomez,
Yes.
Dutra,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Hurst.
Yes, and let the people know we've made a unanimous vote here. Thank you. At the risk of opening up any more cans of worms, I'm going to ask if there's any emergency items to add to the agenda, or if we had enough emergencies. Nobody can say we didn't talk this one to death. Seeing no emergency items, how about requests for scheduling of future agenda items? I think everybody's already weighed in on that one. We got a long list, but let's try Councilmember Garcia's request first.
Actually, I made this request either late 2016 or early 2017.
It's on the list somewhere, I know.
No, it's not. It's not. Because I asked for the list, okay? And so I'm going to make the request again. I would like the council to receive a report on the extent we use Roundup on our parks and city-owned facilities, and to what extent, if any, are we attempting to become green instead of using the Roundup. I know there are other cities in the state of California that have made the decision not to use Roundup anymore, and we can learn from them.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Kaufman Gomez, and then Hernandez.
Yeah, just briefly, I'd like to have an update about the nonprofit for Parks and Rec on the money for the